Look who just made it to the Fortnite item shop. The grabber from, oh my god, he's staring. The grabber from this movie. I swear, everyone is coming to this game now. Also, this is probably one of the only games where you can make Scooby-Doo do this. What is up, everybody? RandomRandomMan here, walking around outside here in my backyard. One, to complete my 10,000 steps for the day. Go out and complete your 10,000 steps a day, everybody. And two, it is nice out weather-wise, despite it being cloudy and being in the autumn season. Speaking of, I am an autumn. You guys like my new sweatshirt? If you don't know what that is a reference to, it is a reference to one of my top 10 favorite TV shows, Gilmore Girls. Earlier this month, I won a giveaway box full of some cool stuff to celebrate the TV show's 25th anniversary, and this sweatshirt was one of those things it came with. I even took a quick selfie of me wearing this thing earlier this morning before I went out and saw the film I am here to talk about right now. You are watching this video for me to bring you my review for Black Phone 2 in one take. Now, this is the sequel to 2022's The Black Phone, which, by the way, side note, the first film is called The Black Phone, while this sequel is just called Black Phone 2, not having the in front of the sequel's title. But anyway, yeah, this is the sequel to the first Black Phone film, and it is a supernatural horror film where we follow Finn returning from the first film 4 years after having survived the kidnapping of the grabber, and he is a serial killer who kidnaps and kills kids, and Finn is still dealing with the after effects of that, while his sister Gwen is having these dreams that haunt her in connection to a decades-old stalking and killing of 3 kids at a winter camp. All of this coming together and being connected to the grabber's seeming return after the first film. Going into this movie, I was actually really looking forward to seeing it because despite me time and time again saying that horror is my least favorite genre of movies, I really enjoyed the first Black Phone film with how it was in terms of a period aesthetic, the performances there. Ethan Hawke as the grabber I thought was a memorable villain, and just, yeah, all of that coming together as like a self-contained kind of thriller here had me curious to see, now that we have a sequel, it would be followed up on fully or properly. Just seeing how, given the fate of the grabber at the end of the first film, it's like, how would this be integrated also with a lot of the characters from the first coming back as well? So with that being said, starting out with the cast and their performances, we have Mason Thames returning as Finn. He really impressed me in the Black Phone, and earlier this year he was the lead in the live-action remake of How to Train Your Dragon, which I also really enjoyed, and now coming back here as Finn. The character, of course, is older, 4 years having passed by in between these movies. The character is now 17, and he still feels a lot of the trauma from having been kidnapped by the grabber in the first film and being the only survivor of the grabber too. He smokes marijuana to deal with coping with all of that here, and now he has the grabber. All that noise. This is what I get for doing this outside in one take. But anyway, Finn now apparently has the presence of the grabber come back to him with a bunch of phones ringing around him, and feeling like he is back, even though he seemingly was gone by the end of the first film. And I think that here, Thames gives an outstanding performance again, just showing the maturity of this character, but also still showing how he still is scared. He was scared in the first film, being a younger kid, and now being older, it doesn't stop him from still having a lot of those same feelings and also the same kind of motivation to go ahead and stop him again. Then we have his younger sister, Gwen, played by Madeline McGraw, also returning from the first film. She gets a real upgrade in this movie. She's actually more front and center in this film than Finn is. As, like I said, she has these dreams, these visions of these 3 kids getting stalked and killed at a winter camp, and also having some connection with her and Finn's deceased mother coming back into the fray here. And I think that she gave probably my favorite performance in this film because of all that she had to do, a lot more that she had to do. The chemistry between herself and Thames as siblings I thought was great here again. And yeah, just having her being a core center of the movie really helped it come together. Also returning here is Jeremy Davies as Finn and Gwen's father, who's now a recovering alcoholic after what we saw of him in the first film being very abusive and neglectful. It's nice to see that he has seemingly turned over a new leaf while still dealing with the after effects of what happened in the first film. I liked that he returned here. And then we have some new characters here, or I should say new characters also because there's an asterisk with this first character I should mention, as Miguel Mora plays Ernesto. He is the brother of Robin, the friend of Finn from the first film, and he was one of the victims of the grabber. But this actor, Mora, is actually having played both of these characters now. He played Robin in the first film, and now he plays Ernesto in Black Phone 2. One, I didn't notice that much because my memory is fuzzy on the first Black Phone film, despite it only being 3 years old. And 2, he is older now, so I guess it's fitting that this same actor is playing 2 different siblings in 2 different movies. So I thought that worked well. He also joins Finn and Gwen on their journey to basically solve this mystery and also be ridding of the existence of the grabber. There's also Damien Bashir, Orale, Mexicano. Sorry, I have to do that every time I shout out a fellow Mexican in any movie, but in any sense. He plays Armando, the lead supervisor of this winter camp that Finn, Gwen, and Ernesto eventually go up to. And I thought he was part of the soul of this movie too. Madeline McGraw as Gwen for sure was the heart of this movie. I thought Damien Bashir was the soul because this is a Christian camp that the kids go up to, and it's not for a job as Armando initially thinks, but then when more details are revealed, he remembers stuff that happened decades ago, also involving the 3 boys being stalked and killed. And yeah, I thought he was great here as well. Ariana Rivas plays his niece, who also works at the camp. Basically, all these performances here I thought were really strong and coming together to help make this movie something in terms of it being a sequel and just standing out as a film on its own. And that is where I get into the writing of this movie. S. Robert Cargill and Scott Derrickson return here as the writers of this sequel, like they did with the first film. Scott Derrickson also returns to direct this movie like he did with the first. And with the writing first, I would say that this movie is basically a mix of being like The Exorcist and A Nightmare on Elm Street, because of how the main through line of this movie does involve Gwen having these visions that are connected to the grabber and also these 3 boys that died at this winter camp that they all eventually go up to. And that is something that really gets the movie going once the movie does get to that point, because I think the first half hour or so of this movie is slow. This is a slower start in terms of being a movie here, which at first, yeah, you know, it makes sense with getting reacquainted with these characters and also reintroducing how the grabber would be coming into all of this again. But yeah, it took a bit for me to get into that, and once we get to the winter camp and more characters are introduced, that is when I think the movie really gets going here. And I haven't mentioned the grabber in terms of the performance Ethan Hawke gives yet, because I was saving that for this point, because we do feel the presence of the grabber throughout. And Ethan Hawke returning as the grabber here, I thought was well integrated, though I do question a bit how much Hawke himself was in this movie, because some of the visions that Gwen has do involve a younger version of the grabber, and we do hear Ethan Hawke talking as the character in modern day sequences. Ugh. My God, again, this is what I get for doing this outside and in one take. But yeah, we do hear Ethan Hawke a lot throughout this movie, whether he's intimidating the characters or just like seeing him all around. So I'm not sure if he really was in it a lot or whatever. But yeah, no, Hawke returning here, I thought was worth it. Also, just to have like, you know, this character come back and being creepy as all hell, to put it simply that way. And also in carrying on with the aesthetic that the movie had, like in the first film. Scott Derrickson's direction here, once again, gives us a lot of grainy and grimy imagery here. It has this look that now that we are in 1982, we have references and lingo to the time period, which I always get a kick out of. And with how the movie has grueling imagery, I mean, of course it does get violent at points, whether we see bloody or gory stuff in the frame, and the way the movie handles all the horror elements, mostly I thought worked because, like I said, the movie took a bit to get going for me because the tension was building throughout. But there were 2 jump scares initially with the film that I was like, okay, they were just jump scares for the sake of being jump scares. They did get my audience, though. I mean, the people around me in the same row as me did jump. They did jolt out of their seats when those jump scares came. The first one I totally saw coming. I was like, okay. But with that, because the whole vibe and the whole atmosphere that the movie was doing, in contrast to the first film, I thought was what had me interested in watching the movie more and more as it did keep going after we got to the camp, because the first film was more like a self-contained thriller inside of this basement or cellar where we followed Finn trying to escape and defeat the grabber. Here, with the winter camp, it's more desolate and more isolated feeling, so that does have an element of fear with that as well, because it's like, oh my god, what could happen? And there's really nowhere else to go aside from this confined area where this camp is. So that I thought worked for sure in selling how literally cold the movie was too, in terms of its look. The music I have to give a shout out here, because the way the score blares and it comes in certain moments, it helped one, build tension. I thought it was also well orchestrated, and just again fitting into how we are feeling with the emotion and a bunch of the character moments here. The last song, the final track in particular, I loved. It came with this specific emotional moment that I don't want to give away, and I thought that was such a cool way to end the movie and tie it in with everything that we had previously seen here. And that is what I would describe this movie as overall being, because despite me feeling like the movie took a bit to get going, and there was also some predictable details here involving the 3 boys from the winter camp. I was like, okay, I know where this is going and how everything is going to fall into place and be connected. But in any sense here, this movie was something that did took some risks. It did take some risks to have us, one, focus on a different character this time around in more prevalent moments, and also lean in more into the supernatural elements that the first film did have elements of. But with that, usually I'm not so much a fan of supernatural horror films, but here I thought it did it to a believable extent, to where it was grounded enough and building off of what the first film was doing to have me go, okay, I can see how this is going. And also it's expanding the lore of what the grabber is all about and having this looming presence despite not necessarily being there the entire time. I'm speaking both in terms of the character and if Ethan Hawke was really there playing the character. But in any sense, I would say overall, I did enjoy Black Phone 2. How would I compare it to the first film? Well, from what I remember, I would say that the first film would be the superior movie if I were just thinking about certain things that came together. And with how this works as a sequel, though, just looking at it on that element, I would feel that it is a good sequel. It works in expanding the characters. It has winning performances and grueling imagery. I think those 2 things are worth it for horror fans to see, especially if you were a fan of the first film. And just having this being the only big horror film coming out for this month, in the month of October and Halloween. I mean, I'm a little surprised that this would be that. But I do think that it is something I recommend for those that do want to have their kind of scares in at the movie theater for the month of October. And again, if you're a fan of the first film, I'm curious to see how others react to this film in comparison to the first film and even as a film on its own. Again, that's what I'm all about here, as I always say in talking about movies. So yeah, I would give The Black Phone, or Black Phone 2, a thumbs up, and specifically to give my final verdict on the film, my final verdict for Black Phone 2 is 3.5 out of 5 stars. Thank you all, as always, for watching. Be sure to like this video, comment on what you thought of Black Phone 2, social media links in the description. Subscribe to my channel for more, and I'll catch you on the next movie review.